All right, we are going live here. Sorry for the delay. And so yeah, his audio is not working, but you should be able to hear him. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce him. I'm just going to go ahead.
Leroy with Deep Rapid. If this
Um,
concerns an on-site role, please just go ahead and hang up.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. While Leroy reattaches me, let me introduce myself a little bit more and talk a bit about what I'm going to talk about today. As Leroy said, my name is Philip Andre. I work for a company called Voatz, and we are in the election industry. I apologize for being late today. Technology got ahead of me. I'm a normal Zoom user, but we were not quite able to get all the bits and pieces working correctly. So today I'm here to talk to you about the future of remote voting, exploiting the capabilities of the blockchain. I am an advisor to the organization. My background is in payment systems. For my sins, I'm responsible for the chip that's on your payment card. I was with Europay when we agreed to write the EMV, or the Europay MasterCard Visa specifications for credit and debit card payments, so mechanisms of securing payment transactions, and very much similar to the kinds of mechanisms we use cryptographically to secure voting transactions. What we propose is secure, accessible, remote ballot delivery, marking, and return as a solution using the cutting-edge technology available to us in state-of-the-art mobile devices, guaranteeing that people who are able to connect to a network can vote from anywhere securely, and most importantly, privately. And when we say private, we're trying to deal with the anonymity of the person. How do we do that? We go through a four-step process. The first step is identity proofing. We're going to ask you to present an identity document and take a live selfie so that we can prove that you are a living human being who matches the identity on that document, and that the document that you are presenting is a genuine instrument. After we've gone through this verification step, we're going to use authentication techniques to bind you to the device, and then to use biometrics and the hardware capabilities, the hardware security factors of the device to bind the device to our services. So we're going to use two-factor authentication, what you have and what you are, the device and your biometric. Anonymity, we're going to assure by creating for each voter an anonymous identifier that only they know how to link to themselves. That anonymous identifier will not link to geolocation, IP address, mobile phone number, IMEI, physical address, name, or none of the other bits and pieces that some people are able to somehow mysteriously linked to who you are. So we've taken and made sure that we have an anonymous random identifier. And the fourth piece of the puzzle is irrefutability. We want to guarantee that the vote that you cast will be received and presented to the tabulation system as you intended. And we're going to do that by recording the vote on an immutable ledger, a distributed blockchain, so that we can guarantee that immutability. And then we're going to use that blockchain later in the audit process that I'll speak of in a bit. The other thing that we want to do, and one of the problems we have with paper ballots, is they are not designed for the accessible. They do not serve the needs of those people who, for example, are hard of hearing, or those people who are blind, or those people who do not have limbs. We're taking advantage of the power of accessibility that have been built into mobile devices to allow those people to participate in society. And we also want to respect our military, those people that are defending our nation who can't get to a mailbox and return their ballot, let alone receiving the mail of a blank ballot that they have to fill out. And we're going to do all of that while assuring the anonymity and the end-to-end verification of it. And how are we going to do that? I spoke of the anonymity, the anonymous identifier. Now let's talk about the end-to-end verification. After you've submitted or you have marked your ballot on your mobile device, you will be asked by the device to review your ballot and to confirm that that is what you want. You will then submit by using your fingerprint to sign that that is you who is presenting that ballot with its anonymous ID to the election system. And we're going to create a receipt, and we're going to store that receipt on an encrypted bulletin board, and we will provide, if the jurisdiction wants, an email return of that receipt so that you can confirm that what was received is as intended. And then during the audit process, we're going to take the paper ballot that was printed based on what you intended and the copy that's stored on the blockchain, and we're going to make sure that those three records are the same. Your receipt compared to the printed ballot that was scanned and tabulated compared to the record, the immutable record that was stored on the blockchain. Now, the big argument around elections is there's nobody who's liable for mistakes. And if somebody hacks into election, you can't do it over again. And as we've read, there are state actors who are attempting to hack into elections. So we look at three parts of the puzzle. We look at the device, the endpoint, where the user is going to receive, mark, and return their ballot from and to. We're going to look at the network, and we're going to look at the ballot that is returned and needs to be securely stored. And we're going to make sure that the device has not been jailbroken, that there are no unassigned applications on it, and that it is not connecting via an insecure network. And then we're going to deal with the denial of service attacks and the other bits and pieces of the network by making sure that we look at multiple paths to return the messages, and we're going to guarantee the delivery of the message to the elected officials who have paid for and are managing the system. And then we're going to encrypt the data as it transits that network. And then we're going to use the blockchain for storage, which gives us the distributed ledger, multiple copies. It gives us the redundancy, and it gives us the immutability of each intended vote. We've done 75 elections, and we've had not one single breach. And that's because we pair prevention in the design of the software, the verification of what we wrote by third-party auditors, and the detection that we will perform during the election to make sure that anybody who is attempting to come into the system is thwarted either by the software or through the signals that are received on the various consoles and in the engagement that we have with the other actors within the environment. And we're going to build this all on a zero trust architecture and philosophy. So our focus is on making sure that security is a journey and that we can use security to build confidence and trust in the capabilities that we have. We have not been trying to do massive elections. We have been piloting, and we're focused on continuous improvement. We want to learn by testing, learn by experimentation, learn by working with election officials to make sure that the user interface, both for the voter and for the administrator, is clean and secure, that the encryption and the cryptography that's running through the network is tight. And we are currently looking at quantum resistance and how do we deal with the threats of the future. We're using biometrics and facial recognition. And obviously, as this conference highlighted, we're working with the blockchain to create that immutable ledger in a trustless environment. So that's where we are today. And I'm ready to take questions or further the conversation back to you. And I probably went a lot faster than I intended.
Yeah, we just, everything's working, but his audio is not working. So I'm going to call him up and.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, sorry about the phone stuff. So no, we do really appreciate that. And so if anybody has any questions, definitely feel free to type them over into the stage there. Otherwise, I will let Philip go, and I will just kind of frame this in the broader context of everything going on. And we really appreciate your time, Philip. And sorry the hopping platform kind of, we're all still getting used to it. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we definitely appreciate you being here, and I will continue a little bit and kind of explain to them a little bit more about this 2020 election and how you guys played a role. And I will reach out afterwards. I appreciate it.
Right. And I'll stay here and listen to what you have to say.
Okay. I'll actually leave you on screen here, and we can just kind of, and I'm going to set my phone. I don't want to put it on speaker because it'll create kind of a microphone echo here.
Yeah. I'll put mute on. I'll mute my end.
Okay. So for anybody, watching this, my main reason for wanting, and let me see if I'm going to go ahead and put this on speaker. My main reason for wanting votes here is because, this last election was obviously, in my opinion, one of the most bizarre ones in our history. And it's one where, the question about the integrity of the ballots was probably brought up more than I've ever seen. And I'm sure probably more than Philip has ever seen. And, there was questions not only around the paper ballots. I mean, there's like lots of stuff going on with the paper ballots, lots of paper ballots showing up, in weird times of the night. But there was also questions about some of the software system like Dominion that was used and the integrity of that system. And so, it's important for people, you guys' age to understand that, obviously, number one, please vote and participate in these elections and try to, help influence the direction of the country. But also to understand that there are new technologies that are emerging that are going to be better at doing, two things that can ensure that something like that, all the stuff that happened this last election doesn't happen again. And the one thing is, as he said, identity verification. So, we need to know that we're identifying the person that's voting and that no one person can vote twice. No dead person can vote. You are who you are. And we know that this is who you are because, we're using biometric methods to verify your identity, which can include everything from, fingerprints to all kinds of other stuff. And so, and secondly, and I lost him there. Secondly,
me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I found what was wrong.
Okay, cool. And so secondly, so the identity verification piece is obviously super critical, which is, we need to know who you are and make sure that you're not voting twice, make sure that if you're dead, you're not voting and all this kind of thing. Secondly, it's the immutability of a vote. So if a vote is actually sort of made, that it cannot be changed. And so that's the whole power of the blockchain. Outside of voting is the immutability where, once a transaction is logged on the blockchain, you have sort of cryptographic hashing to guarantee that, you can't go back and change the transaction after it already happened. And so Voatz is actually a mobile app, that has this biometric identity verification and the ability to immutably record your vote on the blockchain and sort of always match it up against the receipt that you receive. And and I don't know how long you guys have been around, but I do know because I've actually personally met and interacted with Brock Pierce quite a bit down in Puerto Rico. And I know that in this 2020 election, it was kind of a major historical event, where for the very first time in U.S. history, a vote was actually cast for a presidential candidate on the blockchain. And so I'm interested, and there's like lots of counties and municipalities where vote has been used for all sorts of local testing. But I think this was the first time that you guys participated in a presidential election. Is that right?
Yeah. Let's kind of back up a little bit and kind of frame the space. If we look at the question of how do people who cannot make it to the polling place vote, there are four possibilities. The first possibility is vote by mail. Send an envelope through the post and hope that it gets to the other end. The second is via email. You get a blank ballot that's emailed to you. You mark it on a markable PDF and you return it via an email to an email address that somebody has provided to you. And then that person receiving that email will do something with your ballot to make sure it gets into the system. And there is a somebody do something concern there in terms of the risk. The third is the old-fashioned way. We send it via a fax. And we can do that. The fourth, and the way that we have embraced, is we return it using the power of the internet and the encryption and the anonymity that we can create in an internet environment. And if I go back over the other three capabilities, we know that mail has problems. And during the pandemic, if you think about somebody who is in the military overseas, there were international mail that just didn't make it through. So do we tell them they can't vote?
Yeah.
There are disabled people who can't see the ballot. Do we tell them they can't vote? If we then look at email, which would support some of those requirements, it would at least get something to a military who has access to a PC, a laptop, which is pretty easy to consider in the Army or any of the other armed forces. But an email has an address that it came from. So your identity has to be preserved while the ballot is traversing the internet in a format that somebody could read. The same thing with a fax. It comes from a phone number, so the identity of the person behind that phone number is known. And in none of those three is there a assurance of the identity of the person who marked and returned that ballot. So when we move to the internet, we have the ability of taking advantage of the power of a mobile device. I can take a picture of a document, a driver's license. I can take a picture of your face, and I can match those two things together. And then if I've got the optically captured data from that driver's license, I can send a request to the motor vehicle department to say, is that data the right data?
Yeah.
Prove that that person lives in the right jurisdiction so I can deal with the issue. And I can also compare that data to the data that was in the voter roll, the data that what you had submitted during the voter registration. So is your driver's license from the same address? Is your driver's license number the same number as you were originally recorded? So the internet gives us this whole new way of thinking about remote return of the ballot. And I think that's what we want to focus on in the first instance, is how do we deal with the people who are afraid or cannot vote in person?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So how many counties, how much reach did you guys get in this last election, and how many, what kind of traction do you have right now?
Yeah, there were a couple thousand people who voted. So again, we're in pilot mode. Most of them were military. There were a few disabled. There were a few people that were in emergency situations where they were first responders that were allowed to participate. There were 3 counties that we supported, 2 in one on the West Coast and 2 in Utah. And that was what we did for the presidential election. Immediately after the presidential election, we were asked by the Guaidó government in Venezuela to support a plebiscite. And in that particular case, we had over 1 million people using our system to participate in that plebiscite and make their voice known. And we've, as some people will have noticed in the newspaper, we are going to be part of a demonstration of voting for seafarers who are of Filipino descent. So we're looking both at the domestic market as well as the international market. And we've got 75 elections in our war chest and 3 here in the United States during the recent presidential election.
And so I know this is a really obvious question, but I just really want to kind of figure out, kind of maybe get your ideas about, I'd like to see how you see this. I mean, when you're working with Voatz and helping sort of push this blockchain voting concept and this really solid sort of a way of identifying identity, how do you feel or think when you see the kind of things you saw in the last election, where there's just so much confusion about the paper ballots and about the software systems and maybe possible political ties to the people that founded this? Please give us a reaction on that,
Okay, so I'm going to stay away from who did I vote for and all of the political noise that goes behind that. And I'm going to go back to the basic realities. It is clear that there was someone who was telling us that vote by mail was prone to fraud. And there were people who have administered vote by mail programs that were confident in their ability, but they were not absolutely convinced that nothing might happen. Okay, so they recognize there are weaknesses in what they do, but they also recognize well managed it works. Okay, so that's one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle, we heard about all these flaws in the software and Hugo Chavez coming out of the grave and changing votes by the system. Those systems are certified. And somebody, a third party, on behalf of the state, the people who are buying those systems, go through the process of making sure that software is as intended. So, conspiracists can say all they want, but they've got to look at the facts. So the facts are there. Now, where do we think it is relative to what we're trying to offer? Number one, we're an alternative. We do not, at this point in time, believe that we should become the primary means of voting. We are an alternative means of voting. Number two, because there are always issues of cybersecurity, we believe that we need to walk before we do a sprint. And a sprint for me would be doing the 2024 presidential election for anybody, you and I, as two able-bodied people capable of walking to the poll station if we wanted to. So to get there, we then say, let's start by asking the academics who have been pushing this country back to paper voting to start doing an apples to apples comparison of the available options for remote voting. And when I say the available options, an envelope with the ballot inside, an email with the ballot inside, a fax, and I can't say with a ballot inside, or the internet with an envelope being sent securely and encrypted and anonymously across. Let's compare those four mechanisms together and decide which is the most secure, which is the most cost effective, because a stamp costs money. And there's a stamp to receive the invitation to vote, a stamp to return the response to the invitation, a stamp to receive the envelope, and a stamp to return the envelope. And at 50 cents a piece, that's $2. And that's before I pay for the paper. So, let's begin an apples to apples comparison of the available technologies and embrace the fact that the millennial and Gen Z, or I'm not sure what we're going to finally brand them as, I'm a baby boomer who wants the technology. We live in a digital age. We need to embrace the capabilities of the digital revolution.
I agree. So maybe one more question. And again, it's like out of all this blockchain stuff, this is probably the one talk that can kind of, just kind of, there's just all kinds of stuff going on in the world right now, especially in the U.S. with voting. But so I guess my next question is, can you see a future, maybe even a near-term future where, we actually do completely convert to, and I'm not saying a year or 5 years or anything like that, but maybe 10 years, where we wind up migrating to a system where we are leveraging blockchain for, with 100% accessibility throughout all the states for presidential vote all the way down. Based on your experience here, participating even in the small way you did in this last presidential election, do you feel like there was enough buy-in and openness to this sort of system, or do you think that there's forces that be somewhere that are sort of trying to protect the way things are now? What do you think?
Okay, so taking my blockchain hat off and putting on my election some consultant hat, there is purpose to in-person. And the one thing we haven't talked about is coercion. If I'm voting at home, somebody could coerce me to vote in a particular way. If I'm voting in public, I am protected from coercion. So we will always have this interest between I want to vote remotely because, and there's all kinds of good reasons because, and I want to vote in person because.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume those two venues exist. Now you say blockchain. Am I going to take all of that in-person technology and migrate it to the blockchain?
Yeah, like a kiosk or something.
That's an open question.
Yeah.
Am I going to win in the remote with blockchain? That's our goal. Are we ready to tackle both environments? Are we ready to tackle tabulation? Or do we want there to be independence of process so that you don't have one single mammoth vendor responsible for everything? Or do you want vendor responsible for the voter registration system, vendor responsible for the ballot marking system, vendor responsible for the tabulation, vendor responsible for the reporting, with the parties surrounding all of that and the independence and integration built on standards and processes? So I'm not answering your question. What I'm basically saying is there's a lot of work.
Yeah, I understand.
A lot of complexity in this world of voting, and where blockchain fits is still an open question. Because if I think about blockchain, for me, there are two words: trustless and immutable.
Okay.
And if I trust the central authority, why do I want to pay for a blockchain?
Yeah.
If I don't trust the central authority, then I want to pay for a blockchain. And then obviously the immutability, it is technically possible if I trust the central store of data, the system of record, to sign all the transactions and to use all the cryptography that we've been able to exploit in blockchain to secure the data on a database.
Yeah.
I can create a hash chain. I don't have to have a distributed ledger.
Yeah.
So trustless decides, do I need blockchain? And if we continue the divide, so now I will get political. If we continue the left-right divide that exists in this country, where we don't trust the other party, and therefore we are in a trustless society, then I have to drive to something that assures that zero trust is implementable. And zero trust means I don't even trust the people who stand there pushing my ballot through the scanner. I want, as one person described to me, I want homomorphic encryption running down one side of this thing that allows me as the voter to know that my vote, as intended and as anonymously presented, was included in the count.
Yeah.
And I need a whole new set of cryptographic capabilities that parallel the paper process, because let's be frank, a paper count is a damn good thing. You know, be able to compare the paper count to the electronic count is why Georgia voted the way Georgia voted without contest.
Okay.
So yes, blockchain will play a part. Trust will be the driver.
Yeah, and no, I can definitely understand. I mean, right now we have kind of a country that's almost evenly divided, and part of that country, part of that one half of that believes that the voting mechanisms can't be trusted. The other half believes that it can. And I can see when you have those kind of divisions that it could easily drive to blockchain adoption probably faster than if we were all kind of trusted our government and trusted those that were doing this kind of thing. So, I mean, in a really horrible way, maybe the divisions are a good thing, because I do believe that blockchain, immutably recording votes on the blockchain is, I mean, it seems like that's one of the most obvious uses of blockchain technology, is to be able to permanently record, votes.
But again, and here I will argue with you, if I trust my government, and I trust the observers who are monitoring the election, and I build all of the immutable cryptography into that central store, why do I need a blockchain?
Understood. No, I agree.
If I don't trust Any of those parties in the middle, then damn you, please do it on a blockchain.
Yeah. So what if just a couple other questions. So what has the reception been to this type of voting here versus some of these other countries that you're working with?
The reception is mixed. So there is the user who sees the value immediately and recognizes that there are a group of voters that are disenfranchised today that this kind of technology immediately solves for. Then there's another group of players who have really big brands, and they come from universities and they have PhDs and they claim to be scientists who are afraid of technology. And because they're afraid of technology, they start talking about things like unintended consequences. There is a bug. They start worrying about state actors. I would argue that, yes, I'm glad you're thinking about those things, and I'm glad you're writing about those things, but we need to move forward, and going backwards to paper is why Edison built the first mechanical machine. So please come work with us. You are scientists, and help us find a way to deploy an electronically managed voting system that exploits the power in a trustless world of the blockchain.
Okay, well, I'll ask you one more question here, and maybe we can taper it off. I'm just kind of interested. So, what are your thoughts in terms of the kind of message that you would want to deliver to students right now, and kind of maybe how they should be thinking about voting in general, as well as sort of blockchain and its relation to voting?
Okay, so the first statement is write a letter to your elected officials at the state and tell them you want them to investigate this kind of technology, because we need to. Part of our problem today is the ways the laws in the United States are written. Our technology can only be used by a limited population. What's called UOCAVA, which is the Uniform Overseas Civilian Absentee Ballot Act. So a small group of people, and in 2 states, the disabled. So what we need to be able to do is get a groundswell of students who understand technology, have been brought up with technology, to become active and not passive, and pick up the telephone, pick up the email, pick up Telegram or whatever other vehicle they want to use, or Twitter, and turn around to the politicians and say, you need to make this happen. You need to write the law so that we can return our ballot electronically.
Okay. And I weren't sure if you had a second point. You said to the first part. And so the second question was really like, and I guess you really answered it all there, which is how they should be thinking, about voting in general, as well as about, voting in relation to blockchain. So, no, that's a good point. I mean, students, not only just, cast your vote, but also, get active and communicate with your representatives. And if you have any ideas about, any of this kind of stuff, definitely make sure that you communicate them clearly to your representatives,
Yeah, I'll take you back in my history. It's 1972. I'm in university, and we're thinking about a war that we shouldn't have been in, and we're coming out of a period where civil rights was a big deal. As students, we were active. We asked for change, and it's typically students who have the wherewithal and the gumption to demand change. And if they stand up and they're listened to, there is a chance we'll move there. And it's the next generation that will decide. It's not my father, who's still alive at 95, or me, a baby boomer, that's going to decide tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's up to you, our young and educated, to drive us forward.
No, it's a good point. I mean, you look back at the civil rights era, and you wonder where all that explosive energy came from that changed the country and the world so much. And it was essentially the students, and so I think students should realize how much power they have. It's not just about, that you're going to be in control of this world 5 or 10 years from now. Your energy and just the sheer number of students that are going to college right now, is a force in itself, and you can start changing the world right now.
Absolutely. And all it takes is one letter. If every student at every university that's on this podcast was to ask 10 friends to all write a letter, and those 10 friends would ask 3 more, and those 3 more would ask 2 more, we might see change.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well, we can wrap it up here. If anybody has questions, just drop them in there, and we will make sure this video is available for all the hackers that did not see this today. But I really do appreciate it. I know some of these questions I ask you, there's still all sorts of politically charged stuff going on, but do appreciate you being here and explaining more about blockchain voting and votes.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience.
All right, we'll go offline here and be back on the hour there.